The police called me in the morning. We've done a whoopsie. It's been leaked online. We are sorry, we'll learn from lessons and all the usual.
I am truly sorry.
So sorry.
Can the public trust the British police? If you get 25 to 35% of the House of Commons, obviously becoming more Islamic, that could change the face of the country.
Why won't celebrities, why won't Rory, Stewart and Alastair Campbell and Emily Maitlis, they should be screaming this from the hilltops.
The Islamic tribe, the mentality psychologically became more about, oh, we're not winning, so victimhood was created. They will wake up when the fight is more clear for them to pick a side. It's just a matter of time.
The last 2 months, you guys have really listened when I've asked you to subscribe. Thank you so much. Now, the next step is to ask you on YouTube to hit the reminder notification on my homepage. Without that, you'll miss out on my videos, and we wouldn't want that. Make sure as well that notifications are set as on YouTube or it won't work. If you're watching on Spotify, please hit follow. Mahyar Tousi, welcome back on the show.
Well, I don't know how I ended up here again. I got lost, but I'm back.
If it were up to me, every episode would be a Mahyar Tousi episode. Tell me though, you've had an episode of sorts itself, which is actually very serious. The police have leaked a report about you. What's gone on?
Yeah, so this goes back probably about a month, 2 months ago. It's been longer now. There was yet another Saturday pro-Palestinian protest. Obviously, I went there to report, and there were counter-protesters with Israeli flags, Union flags. Things heated up in a sense that the moment I got there, we started hearing the police talking to each other, communication devices saying, Tousi is here, as if the eagle has landed or whatever. But they tried to basically, they threatened to arrest me because of a joke I made online about Hezbollah pages. And I had a conversation, I was like, okay, fine. No more jokes, whatever. And they said, well, we might have to talk to you on Monday, 2 days from now. Come to the police station. And they said, we're going to send information. They didn't. And Monday came, I was like, okay, everything's gone. Then a day later, the police called me in the morning. I was like, okay, this is it. They said, actually, it's not about that. We've done a whoopsie. There was a report about you on that day at the protest. It's been leaked online. We are sorry, we'll learn from lessons and all the usual. And they sent a DCI to my house with the actual report. And to basically, they made it sound like an admin error, it's just a casual bureaucracy to downplay it so I don't get angry. But it wasn't just me. My name was mentioned, two others who were on that day counter-protesters. Niak Rorbani, some people know him as Mr. Banana Man, who goes to this protest, and also Mark Burberg. Both of them are part of this group called Our Fight UK, which is basically to fight for the UK against Islamists and the far left. But our names were mentioned, and the report about me and my activities on the day was false. They said Mahyar Tousi was antagonizing, and you can see the live stream, the evidence is there on YouTube, that on that day I don't tend to approach the protesters. I just stand in the corner and just film them, because it's not worth it, and also I don't want to die. And there's one issue was that obviously the report was false, and obviously it got leaked. But Niak, for example, I can't get into details, but the stuff that it was leaked about him actually affected his family in Iran even more than me, in terms of his more details about his identity, let's just say. So his father was taken, there was a lot of things that happened to him. My father obviously is still stuck in Iran. He had to basically go into hiding more just in case, because obviously if a police report in the UK says Mahyar Tousi is antagonizing, basically is the enemy of all these lovely Palestinian supporters, then obviously the Islamic Republic are going to kick off. But since then, obviously, everything's became more bureaucratic. The police essentially been downplaying it, and they didn't even get in touch with me anymore. They just said, yeah, someone's leaked. We can't really tell you who, whatever. So I kept chasing. Obviously, we filed a complaint, talked to lawyers. Then they finally came back. Another person from the police gave me more information. Finally, about a couple of weeks ago, they said, so yes, we have arrested the person who leaked the report. They have been, the contract has been terminated because they were a contractor. They were not a full-time employee, apparently. And they have also been, they're out on bail, but there's going to be a whole investigation and, court case or whatever. And they now promised me to keep me posted every 28 days, which is now coming in probably in the next half an hour. So I need to catch up with them. But it's about the principle of it. that can we trust the police right now? It's not about the whole institution. It's about the fact that clearly there's a problem with recruitment and contracts, at least. We have good people working for the police, but we also have a lot of special people working for the police. And can the public trust the British police?
There's so much to unpack there, and I got a few different questions about it. But are we at a point then where there are enough, that the numbers are high enough of Muslims and perhaps Islamists or extreme Muslims in the country that we cannot trust our institutions?
One thing to admit, and the political establishment don't tend to do it, is not all cultures are the same. And it's not really just about the conversation, or this culture is better than the other. Some cultures will find it difficult to integrate, and some cultures won't. And if that culture, and we're now talking about political and even religious culture, it's not really about being practicing religious, but when we talk about Western Europe, we are primarily talking about Christian culture, everything that was built, and your attitude and everything else. And there are certain things that if you, for example, come from the Islamic culture, especially certain classes in certain countries like Pakistan or Bangladesh, not necessarily a rich, educated person from Saudi Arabia. And if the demographic changes in an area, obviously the institutions will also change. So hypothetically, there's an area in Birmingham. When that demographic becomes more Islamic, objectively, we could say, oh, that's fine, or it's not fine. Objectively, it's changing. Obviously, number one, pubs are closing down. But you say, oh, well, it's just pubs. I still care, but pubs is the first step. And then the recruitment for the local institutions will change automatically. And, it's natural that because there are more people who are more Islamic, especially first generation, obviously they will be applying to work for the police, to work for the council. And, you can't blame them, right? There will be fewer, let's just say, native English people in that area now. But we started this before we got to this point. We started this about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the establishment, by using, what we now call DEI, work diversity stuff. Before the demographic actually changed, we started bringing in people because diversity is our strength. Now, I don't really care about your skin color and about where you were born. If your attitude is like the rest of the people in a tribe, in a nation with a flag and a border, is a tribe, then everything will be fine, but it's clearly not. So why did we start changing the demographic of our institutions before the actual local area changed? So now, and there's a lot of people from the Islamic side who are very proactive in politics. Again, you can't blame them. More local councils are changing, and to exaggerate the situation, some people would say it's exaggeration, but it's just a matter of time. In a decade or so, the next few general elections, if you get 25 to 35% of the House of Commons obviously becoming more Islamic and who care about their views and their worldview, obviously they can now legally and constitutionally and democratically change legislations that could change the face of the country. Now, again, objectively, you could say, I don't care if we ban pubs or ban bacon, but I think some people care.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a vegetarian, and I would defend the people's right to eat their bacon, particularly if it's a religious sort of motivation to prohibit it. This is really scary. One thing that you talked about then, and it is a really interesting thing, that it seems to be an argument on the left a little bit, that if you just sort of made people wealthier, and it's ironic that this is a lefty argument, because it's a pro-capitalist argument. It's saying that these people, because I think you were suggesting that people who have come over from maybe poorer backgrounds, so if we were to find a way to make everybody wealthier, would it make them less extreme?
So this is the argument from mostly the liberal side rather than the left-wing side, and especially the new liberal side. I tend to generally agree, but it depends where you're doing it. So the idea is, if you support fair and free trade deals and just concept of trade, you actually help build those countries that, I know we're not supposed to say, but they're third world, and countries will come up. The second option is the left-wing approach, which is, well, if someone is basically from the third world and they're struggling, then just open the door, bring him here. And then when they're here, the liberal side would say, now let's make them prosperous and educated here. Like, okay, no. Common sense. Firstly, If you help people in their own countries, not with foreign aid throwing money at it, no, just, with that just sort of like what the British Empire did, relatively speaking, but in a more modern way and more civilized way, helping them to be able to trade and actually remove restrictions. For example, the European Union have these restrictions on coffee beans from Africa. So Africa produces all these coffee beans. You could get them, fine. But if Africa uses the coffee beans to make coffee themselves and then sell it to Europe, then the European Union says, no, we're not going to buy it from you. We get the coffee beans from you cheap. We're going to give it to European manufacturers. They'll do it. So it's these tiny things that matter. So obviously, then African manufacturers, then they're not going to be able to be prosperous. And this is something that is built, it's made there. It's just one example. If you actually help those countries to be better, and again, not by throwing money, then they won't have to come here. Because if a few people who are actually actual talent, you're draining the talent from, for example, countries like Iran, because of everything that's happened over the last 40, 50 years, different type of people leave the country. And that also includes the talent. And I'm not saying it in a left-wing way, all migrants are scientists and doctors. But by default, same thing happened with many countries, including China. The talent would leave because they don't want authoritarian regimes. So not only you want the talent to stay there, obviously actually it's in the interest of the globalist governments to say, no, we have to bring the talent here. But the problem with the rest of the left-wing side is, let's just bring everybody. Everybody is a doctor. Everybody is a scientist. That's not how it works. So if you actually help those countries build in their own place, then you won't even have the wave of migration. So what is it our job to use our tax money to educate people here? We have our own people and our own problems. Let's just focus on our people first. Anybody who's born here now, and start from there.
Oh, man. But it's not going to happen. And I think there's not a will for it to happen because nobody seems to admit that anything's going wrong. I mean, if we had and some people say it's much higher than what the census is saying, but if we had 10% of this population who were Scientologists or Hasidic Jews or Jehovah's Witnesses, this would be on the front page of the paper every day, every newspaper. Like, hang on, what are we going to do to stop this religious group from changing the way we live our lives? With Islam, this is different. Why won't celebrities, why won't Rory Stewart and Alastair Campbell and Emily Maitlis, why aren't they should be screaming this from the hilltops. Why aren't they touching it?
This is the thing. So when I criticize about, Islam's ideology and how, the effect in the West, some people, for example, on the left would say, oh, your problem is just with Islam, but what about the Jews? And I'm like, well, if we also had a few million Hasidic Jews, like ultra-Orthodox, very specific type, very religious, also basically demographic changing in favor of them, and then they start basically making rules, I'm going to have a problem with that too.
Yeah.
If a bunch of gingers from Wales try to basically take over, I will have a problem with that too. But we're not having that problem. And most modern Jews, and people say Jews, they're not just religious and ethnicity. So like people could be Jewish, but they're not actually religious,
like me.
Okay, yeah, exactly. You guys exist, and,
no, not for long.
Yeah, I mean the way things are going.
Yeah.
But the thing about the nature of the Islamic tribe is that it came out of nowhere, in the sense that it came from a corner of the world where nobody was even going there, what we now call Saudi Arabia, and nobody was trading there. So it was in their interest, some of them, to say, oh, well, we're going to have to make ourselves organized. Look at next door. Like, we got all these, like the Roman Empire, we got the Christianity, we got even the Jews, the Israelites, they all become, why are they organized? Oh, so they have a set of rules. So we have to do the same. So they did that. But the problem with that was that obviously because they came late, then there were some people who were more ambitious. They created this idea, well, we have to expand. And what we call this was the original idea of the original version of the one world government, but this time under the flag of Islam. And the first wave of expansion, unlike the early days Christianity, which was just by preaching and actually being persecuted, the messengers, they were obviously the apostles and everybody else. The first option for the Islamic tribe was to conquer, because they did actually try to talk to people, other people, saying, do you want to convert? They didn't. They sent a letter to the king of the Persian Empire. He tore it apart. 10 minutes later, they conquered Persia. So that was the first option. But since then, obviously, there's been a lot of wars. The Islamic Empire obviously grew for a little while and it came back. Since then, Christianity has been, Christian culture and Christian tribes and systems have been on the rise. And that meant the Islamic tribe, the mentality psychologically, became more about, oh, we're not winning, so victimhood. was created. Victimhood mentality, which also is linked to other ideologies like Marxism. You know, you want to win, but if you're not winning, you start to attack. If you lose, play the victim card. And by the way, it's not on purpose. It's not like planned. Some people think, for example, even
Muslim
like,
Brotherhood.
oh yeah, they're like they do not. No, it's psychological. Like, and it's automatic. It's autopilot. Like right now, Hamas people in Gaza, like, you know, we're winning. They're going around with their uniforms because there's ceasefire. The moment ceasefire fully ends, they're going to cry again. It's not planned. It's just autopilot. It's generational. It's in their genetics.
It's human.
Exactly. So because of, to answer your question about the demographics and everything else, by default, the Islamic tribes psychologically have been told for centuries and centuries that you are the outsider, everybody else, but you are superior. But they're not listening to all these infidels. So now you go, make your life better, try to basically change them. You shouldn't change. You shouldn't integrate when you go to Germany. Again, it's all subconscious. It's not like someone tells them before they go on the plane or on a boat.
Yeah.
And that's
a minority. A minority of 2 billion people. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, I was often told as a child, you know, you're Jewish, there aren't very many of us in the world, and all of those, you know, be careful, that kind of thing. You know, it's 15 million in the world or something, Jews. There's hardly any in this country. There's a couple 100,000. I can't imagine being in the mind of particularly an extreme Muslim who's saying, gosh, everyone's against us, we're a minority, and you're 2 billion strong, 50 odd countries, some of them extremely wealthy countries. It's incredible that they're able to feel like victims. And
it's fascinating because so there are, for example, more extreme movements in like nationalist movements in Europe, primarily, not here, but they do exist in Poland, in Germany, in Italy. And even those groups, whatever you want to call them, far right or just ultra nationalist, it's interesting that these sort of groups throughout decades and centuries in every nation, when they see a threat, again, rationally or irrationally, they see a group of people changing them, they always do lash out. And they did it against the Jews in the 30s, right? Mm-hmm. We still haven't really seen, despite what our Prime Minister says, the far right is on the rise, we still haven't really seen any sort of organized like level of hatred physically, even in Europe, against basically anybody who's Muslim. And so that's, by the way, that's a good thing. Imagine if we like already had like random people, like skinheads in Germany were going around beating up random people who just because they're brown.
Well, this is why I said to Katie Hopkins, you can't be asking for a final solution of Islam, although she denies that's what she meant. But I'm not having that because she's pretty smart.
Yeah, it's tricky. But the issue is when the establishment are going around saying Islamophobia is on the rise, we need more laws in favor of it. The more you acknowledge it, the more you're actually then telling even random people who are just Muslim, whether they're born here or they're coming here, they're gonna feel more even on the the defensive. So you are gonna cause more clashes. You're gonna cause more division.
Yeah.
When you are basically telling, firstly, the white middle class people that Islamophobia is on the rise. Whose fault is it? Oh, it's the white working classes, right? So they're gonna hate everybody else. Then the Islamics are also being told, yes, everybody hates you now. So what's the solution?
There was that experiment, wasn't there, when they put they pretended they put scars on people's faces. Do you know that one? There was like 100 people, and they said, "Oh, we've done makeup, we put a scar on your face. You're going for an interview now." And they actually removed the scar last minute before they went into the interview, but they didn't know. So the people went in, and pretty much all of them came out reporting that the interviewer had been against them and been biased against them and prejudiced, probably because of their scar.
Brilliant.
And they were then told, "No, you didn't have the scar in the interview."
Yeah.
So I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point is it goes back to why is it that again, we're stereotyping, but the Islamic tribe in the West, especially in certain counties, as now they're becoming majority in certain towns and cities, why they still seen as victims is because, unlike, I mean, for example, even the National Socialists in Germany, when they became on the rise, or the Italian fascist movements, when they actually got the establishment, they took control. They seemed like, hey, we are now in charge. Whereas, and we've had it with many other movements, even the ancient, the so-called Greek side, but it had the different sides, obviously, when they were fighting against the Persian Empire. And the whole movie about 300, which, by the way, is extremely inaccurate. There was not 300 of them. There was like 300,000 because the rest of them ran away from the Persians. So basically, the Persian side is like the evil side in that movie. Wow. And the Greeks are like underdogs, sure. But we've had basically minority movements become majority movements and they show strength. But the Islamic tribe, psychologically speaking, especially when they come to the West, they are presented in a way that even the way the appearance, the clothing and everything else, and they won't be able to speak the language at first. So there are a lot of people in the West who do self-guilt and self-hatred. They do this kind of patronizing, oh, you little poor person. It's also extremely rude and insulting even to them, right? But that's why those guys, the Gary Lineker types, if I complain about saying, these people, not every single person, but like, for example, you got the Islamic people who are becoming local councillors or MPs, and they are literally standing on a platform of changing Britain, saying we're doing it for Gaza. The Gary Lineker types, they're just looking at him as like the way that person with the beard, like an old man, like with the clothing, like, oh, but look at him, he's so innocent. They said the exact same thing about Ayatollah Khomeini when he was in exile in Paris in the 1970s from Iran. They were saying, oh, look at this nice old man. There were also then the CIA and all these guys decided to help him because they thought, because their fear was, well, the Shah is going down. The fear was the Soviet Union is going to take over Iran. Let's use this old man. He seems nice. We could definitely control him. And then people in the world could basically accept him as the alternative. Because look at him. It's just very like, it's like a Gandhi character. Like, how many times do you have to fall for the same trap?
They seem to over and over. And it's really annoying because I think they're still fighting yesterday's war in the sense of the Nazis. They are still looking for people who are racist and everywhere. That doesn't seem to be what's happening now because people seem to psychologically go for whatever makes them popular, whatever's fashionable. Well, if you're a racist today, you're certainly not popular and fashionable and cool. So you just don't. I think that's part of why we don't have many racists today. Do you know what I mean?
You say it perfect. So they are fighting the previous format. So until basically the 40s, anybody that was basically the rival or the enemy of our way of life, they were confident and strong. So back in the day for England, it was Napoleon and the French, all like, oh, they're so strong. Okay, they are calling themselves the enemy basically, like a Bond villain. Hitler was the same, Mussolini was the same, and everything else. And relatively, just basically after the 50s, for a couple of decades, the Soviet Union. Then obviously 80s, 90s, well, 70s, 80s, it went down.
Yeah.
Since then, it's changed. Even Marxism, they don't tend to, so you mentioned, for example, actual racists. Even Marxists, they don't really tend to present themselves as revolutionary, angry, strong types. We actually invited them into the tent, so the Western establishments think that we kind of eliminated Marxism because we tamed them. How did you tame them? We brought them into the tent, democratic tent. That's nice. What happened? Oh yeah, we now call them social democrats or socialists. But so what's the difference? Well, they still have the same views, but the implementation is different now. They don't want to do a bloody revolution. They do it through democracy. We're like, okay, that's good start. But they still have the same policy ideas, control and, using big government and high taxes and take your land. Like, yeah, so you didn't actually eliminate it. So the same problem we have, for example, with all the other existing threats that we currently face. So right now, the Islamists, especially the political ideology of it, they don't tend to show themselves as like Hitler did, like nice, like in a strong uniform. Oh, I just took a shower. Look at me. I'm still like... well presented, or like Napoleon, like, look at me, I'm so strong, be scared of me.
Me and you.
Yeah, basically, yeah. We are more of an enemy, but back in the day. So now we don't have that. Yeah. You had Bin Laden like sitting in a cave watching porn videos.
Was he doing that?
He had pictures of Condoleezza Rice. It was really weird. Wow. So it's changed. But some people don't get it.
They don't even seem to be hiding it now. We have now an Islamic party, which will, of course, rise in the coming years and put pressure on Labour in particular and the Greens, of course, to cater to their needs. So what has to happen? Is there ever a point, let's say we are going down the trajectory of Iran, Lebanon, I think Afghanistan, Turkey, in terms of becoming Islamified or whatever, and I can't see how that's not happening. I don't know what would have to happen. At what point does someone like the News Agents podcast, or at what point do Gary Lineker, these guys actually turn around and go, oops, oh yeah, no, stop.
Well, there are two scenarios I see. One is more pessimistic, as a more Douglas Murray level. Yeah. Europe is dying and it's going to continue to go down this route, and it doesn't have to die based on, I don't know, ISIS taking over. It will be softer. But there is a second option in terms of the outcome, which is still not the best, but it is a bit of a mess, which is, yes, the more middle-class, liberal, left-wing podcasters, like the news agents types, they will wake up and the establishment when the fight is more clear for them to pick a side. So they believe if it gets to a point where a character like al-Jilani, who's now in charge of Syria, who basically was a new version of ISIS, somehow rise up here, then basically because we're going to get to a point where demographics will change. So, for example, Birmingham would want to be more of like a independent entity, an Islamic entity, even unofficially. Obviously, Westminster will oppose it. Then there will be a local uproar saying, well, what about the will of the people in Birmingham, hypothetically. Then the more extreme people from Birmingham will then rise up. Then that's the point where, for example, Rory Stewart or Alastair Campbell could pick a side because it will be more clear who they're fighting. So, we are now fighting against the actual extremists, not that other independent Islamic MP who's not actually supporting the al-Jilani character, but he still wants to close down pubs. So there could come a point when the conversation will be more like the 2000s. Extreme radical Islamists, let's get a few basic moderate Muslims to be seen to be fighting with us. It doesn't really fix anything because you haven't actually addressed the real issue. There are different values here. So I don't see how. We're not going to have a situation like Spain and Portugal a few hundred years ago when there was a crusade and literally kicked anybody who was Muslim out. I don't see how that could happen unless there's some sort of massive third world conflict. And there's a lot of people and analysts who say any sort of version of World War III is not going to be a traditional version like us fighting against China or Russia. It's going to be happening at the same time in all these countries like France, Sweden, Denmark, UK, and it will be internal, like a Trojan horse situation. There are people here, and they're actually homegrown now. Second generation and third generation of the some Islamic families, they are less integrated than their own parents. Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah.
When migrants come, second, third generation, then they'll be chill, automatically integrated. But not really anymore with a certain culture. So the fight will be internal, almost like a civil war, but civil war sounds very specific. It will be internal conflicts in the name of one prophet.
That war you describe is frightening because it's let's be honest, it's unwinnable. I mean even relatively modern wars fought externally like Vietnam. I mean the problem with that, or in Afghanistan, all these countries, is that it was almost an enemy within because America and the Allies or whoever were stationed there and didn't know who was their enemy, who was on their side. The locals knew how to sort of tunnel and go into the dig things and all of that. It was just impossible to win. If it's your own population, your own British civilians, I just think we're completely screwed. Why? I guess I'm asking the same question over and over. I walk around, I go to sleep thinking about the same question, which is like, why isn't everybody else running around screaming? Have I lost my mind here? Is there any positive way out of this?
It's primarily because the narrative is still being controlled by the mainstream, and that includes the media, the press, and Westminster. Even though the mainstream media and even the press, like newspapers, don't really have a competition from new media, but people don't really tend to read newspapers anymore, even online, really.
They get was 30% now social media news, so we are making an impact.
Exactly. My point is, despite the fact that the viewership and even credibility when it comes to mainstream media and press is going down, they still hold, there's an illusion of credibility. So if something happens on the BBC, for example, if they say something, it's not like because 60 million people now watched it and they all respected it, but the big players, which is basically the Westminster bubble, politicians, the lobbyists, the advisors, the civil servants, they watch the BBC. So the BBC will do the report. They're not addressing me and you. They're addressing that bubble. Then that becomes the narrative. Then the civil servants and advisors, the lobbyists, politicians will then decide based on the report by the BBC or Sky News. So if, for example, the BBC starts talking about grooming gangs, then they'll do something about it, right? Even though nobody in real world is actually following it. So that's the problem. It doesn't. A lot of heads are still buried in the sand because the establishment tells them, "Don't worry about it. Yeah, there are some issues. Yeah, someone else just stabbed someone else. It's just isolated incidents." So, and also there's a European thing. There was a reason a lot of Europeans left and went to North America and created the US. They had a different mentality. European culture is beautiful. A lot has been achieved, including the modern Western civilization from it, although most credit to go to the Anglo side. But there is a problem with the European culture overall, stereotype. Because obviously we did a stereotype about the Islamic side, let's also now do it to the European side. They tend to like order over freedom. They tend to like authority. As long as there's a good relationship between them and authority, they prefer authority and stability than liberty, because liberty and freedom comes with risk. So some of them were different. They were thinking different. So they left. They chose to take a massive gamble, get on a boat, go all the way to North America. They knew if they succeed, they'll be free. If not, they'll die. And they chose that life because they say, I don't want to be ruled by an authority, by a king in Europe. I want to be my own king. I don't want to be anybody else's king. I want to be my own king. So those people left from Ireland, from England, even from Italy. They all went, Germany, Netherlands, they went there. They are built differently. And that's just genetics, I guess, and also way of life, because even the generations that we've had, the Americans, basically, the European Americans in America, they still have that fire. Europeans don't have that. Europeans were the ones that, when the government was telling them, okay, so the first lockdown is over, but now we have a traffic light. In your area, this is the green traffic light. People had to wait for the Prime Minister to tell them whether they can leave their house. Again, not everybody. There were also a lot of people who were opposing, but these are the people... The anti-lockdowners were the people who would have left Europe to go to America back then. Again, whether rightly or wrongly, they didn't want to be told what to do. But the rest of them, there were literally a lot of people, millions of people in Europe, who were waiting for the Prime Minister and their media to tell them, can I go to Tesco twice or not? That's the problem with Europe.
Man, it's really, we are quite prone to authoritarianism. Although you do see that in South America as well. They like that. But the States seem to like that whole freedom thing.
But there's a lot of it that goes back to the cultural side. So the political Catholic side, culturally speaking, not in terms of religiously. The tribes that remain more Catholic-y instead of obviously those who left the Catholic side and created Protestantism and all that stuff, and including Anglican side, they were the early version of we don't want to be told what to do by the authority. So the South Americans are Catholic. They're all basically from the Spanish side primarily, and some from Portugal. Right now, Spain. And any country, even in Europe, that still have, again, it's not really about being practicing Catholic or practicing Protestant. Culturally, they still, as a nation, they're mostly Catholic.
That's interesting.
They still like the centralized authority. Again, it's not really about the religious side. You know, the Protestant side still have weird problems with the whole Pope thing. And obviously the Vatican side would say, you guys left the actual religion. Catholic side is the real Christianity. We're not talking about that part. We're talking about the symptoms of the clash of psychologically, why some people followed Luther and those who were basically going against the Catholic culture, that centralized kind of authority thing. There were some people who wanted it. That was their agenda. We're going to create Protestantism. But the normal people who followed it, why did they follow it? Because psychologically, they were the ones who saw that as authority. Why should we listen to someone in Rome? And that is the difference. Right now, actually the Catholic side is still majority, and they're like very lovely, and they're very also, not just in terms of religious practices, but also in terms of values. They live probably better lives in terms of family life and everything else. But there is a difference in terms of mentality. So South America, you know, they still would go towards authoritarianism, accidental authoritarianism. That's where you have dictatorships there. Yeah.
Always the way. Are you noticing a difference? I'm noticing that more and more people are coming up to me or messaging and emailing, go, God, I'm watching yours. And even the celebrities seem to be watching our kind of stuff and going back on that wokeness. You know, Ash Sarkar famously last week sort of announced and started saying as if she was never part of that almost. And Katherine Ryan, do you know that? I think she's Canadian, the comedian, also came out with something today. So all that wokeness, and everyone's sharing videos of her and many of the others like saying transvestites need to be able to get changed in women's toilets and things like that. Does it speak to that, what I was saying before about that sort of fashion, and that wokeness is out of fashion now? Yeah,
it's selective. The withdrawal from wokeness is selective. So the side that were promoting wokeness, they are gonna now focus on other wokeness. So, for example, the conversations about public toilets, women's spaces, it was always a losing argument for the woke side. It was just a matter of time for it to fall apart. That's why you actually have some people. So there's a difference between, for example, communists, like proper far left people, and the liberal wokey people. So the Ash Sarkar type people, the Novara media types. They're more on the radical left. So actually, they even a few years ago, they used to basically make videos. Their argument was they weren't really on the side of the more middle class liberal wokey side.
Okay.
Their focus is mostly on race. So they're going to move to that in terms of wokeness, away from the rainbow, but towards race. And they're going to include Islam and Muslim into race.
Okay.
Even though Islam is not a race.
That's scary.
Yeah. So
this is scarier than the trans argument, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, and it'll be more difficult for both sides to actually win. So the trans argument, in terms of the obvious clashes, which was again women's spaces and the young people telling them what to do with their body and brainwashing, that was easy to win for the non-woke side. When it gets to a point where it's going to be moving, so even the BLM one was actually easy to win, because the BLM one was mostly led by the middle class far leftists. And they were saying a random person who's a bit dark, born in middle class LA, who is, by the way, not fully dark, it's basically generational. They've already been mixed anyway, like Meghan Markle, right?
Yeah.
She's not black.
Yeah.
She's as black as she's white, right? But they say she's black. That argument was also, like the trans debate, was never going to be won by the woke side, because the BLM stuff was very privileged. They were just like, fighting a fight that doesn't exist. But the new version of identity politics, well, it's not new in terms of new focus, which is just overall ethnic minorities, and especially basically anybody who's brown and Muslim. This is going to be what the focus from the woke side is going to go on now. Islamophobia.
I see. And then the right, or at least the anti-woke side, seems to be winning this culture war. Obviously, Trump makes a difference. Often you have politics downstream of culture, but in this instance, I think it's culture downstream of politics. Trump gets in, it changes the Overton window, everybody moves a little bit. And once, it feels like when the left got into power, I suppose, at least culturally, the last 15 years, culturally, it's all been very leftist. They fractured a little bit. There's that sort of extreme edge and the centrists who didn't really do much about them. Now we have this right. I mean, were you at ARC? Did I see you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see you, did I?
Not at the conference, I was at the after party.
Oh, yeah. Very typical Tousi. Okay, well, I was at the boring bit and not at the party. Yeah. But at the boring bit, it was very interesting to see like such a diverse array of people all together, I think, against this kind of wokeness. And it led me to think, in a few years' time, are we all going to be fractured? Because you got it looked like a chessboard at times with all the bishops and things everywhere. And I thought, that's not my place, and you've got your Jordan Petersons who he was sort of preaching in a Christian way. And then you've got your Douglas Murrays and Konstantin who are talking very in a secular sense.
Yep.
And I thought, this might not be able to, are we going to go back to the old battle lines?
No, this is actually a good thing. So I'll explain why. The variety of different versions that you have on the so-called right, if you can call it right, it's just basically anti-left. It actually helps. This is what's helped to even create Trumpism. So the people will call it reactionary politics, but it's not necessarily. It's basic populism, which is a good thing. And there should be a limit, by the way. So the creation of Trump. So before you had a character like Bill Clinton or Tony Blair, they were in the position of authority. They would shape the agenda. They would convince the public this is the right thing to do, and then the public would say, "Okay, cool," because the authority told me. That side, they're still doing that, and they wonder why they keep losing. Because the other side, and it's not just Trump, it's also Javier Milei and many others, they're not all same politics, but they're basically more populistic. It comes from the bottom up. And it actually started with the original version of New Media. And that also includes New Media Radio, which was Rush. And obviously since then, Alex Jones, it's been going on for ages. And you had bulldozers. You always needed bulldozers, and even you still have bulldozers too. Bring down the gate, say something outrageous, and then you need the Douglas Murrays and the Konstantins to go and win the actual argument. So it's a good thing right now. You have this weird mix of, you look at it like they're all in the same room, like how are they going to get along?
Yeah.
Actually, everybody's in his own place. Sometimes there are clashes, like, they will have a fight, like, I don't know, like right now, like Tucker Carlson will have a disagreement with Ben Shapiro, but mostly they know their places. And actually, this is a good thing. So you have Nigel Farage saying something, and he's actually become more mainstream now anyway, but he would have said something outrageous before about Brexit back in the day. And then you had the rest of the Vote Leave campaign, which was the official campaign, trying to then find the intellectual arguments to win the argument. And the same thing's happening now. So Trump and the Trumpian movement, and many others like Trump, including Meloni in Italy and Javier Milei, the influence came from what we call new media. And social media. They start listening to their versions of even Alex Joneses and others as well, and Ben Shapiro's and many others, they were saying the things that you couldn't say before. So, for example, like Tommy Robinson, when he was saying those things about basic things like grooming gangs, nobody was listening, right? But now when someone like Tommy Robinson would say it, it would still be outrageous. Alastair Campbell ties will criticize him, but Sky News will be forced to report it because the politicians, enough politicians are now listening, even if they don't have to like someone like Tommy, but they realize, or like Mahyar Tousi, if I say something, they'll realize, or you say, there's a lot of following that we have. They say, okay, so a lot of people are saying, it's like a focus group. Back then, Bill Clinton had to use focus groups and Tony Blair, but the focus group is now public. It's on social media. They can see it, and good politicians get it, and they actually start to respond. So Alastair Campbell will call it reactionary politics, but it's just responding to the bigger focus group. You idiots still think that you need to have your own selective focus group. This focus group is already online. Just listen to the public, what the concern is, and respond.
I feel like Tommy is relatively centrist. And I know that's going to upset a lot of lefties who think he's far right, but he seems quite centrist to me, whereas maybe a Candace Owens or a Tucker Carlson, for example. So I just wonder, I don't think Tommy's going to start arguing with Candace, but I think maybe the likes of Douglas Murray, if this becomes a status quo, I think there might come a time when we become a bit complacent and they start to clash.
So, well, this is controversial because if people who are technically right-wing watching this, some of them will get upset because it's a cult of personalities. You criticize one, they're like, oh, how dare you criticize my lovely hero.
Yeah.
But people like Candace Owens, they are the true definition of reactionary, but not in a good way. And it's always like you have to be aware of those who, depends where they came from. So a lot of the converts to the right, it's the same thing, by the way, with religion. So those who are converts, they become militants. She was her background, her family, like a more left wing, and then she took the red pill, as they say, and then she fought against Black Lives Matter, and she's said a lot of right things, and she campaigned on the right things. So I'm not completely attacking Candace on everything she's done.
Gender, she's still, good on gender.
Yeah, very good, and she's very good at debating. The issue with that is that there are other examples like that in the UK. One is, for example, what's his name? The former LBC.
Maajid
Nawaz. Yeah. He was an extremist. He became a liberal, became a Lib Dem. He's so middle ground, and then he went more kind of towards the theories, and he's gone doo-doo.
Yeah. So they're too smart almost. He's clearly so intelligent, Maajid, and so is Candace.
They overthink, and then when you overthink, then things happen. So now Candace is basically, she's reactionary, but she becomes the fringe, whereas someone like Tommy, actually, he's too moderate. I've had debates with Tommy Robinson, like, it's still so like pro-migration. It just says the right people. I'm like, can we do mass deportations? But
you're an extremist.
Yeah, so he's actually, I mean, because he when he started the EDL, there was a problem at first. The English Defence League, which was a grassroots movement, working class English, it was against basically grooming gangs, because it was basically these people were not intellectuals, and Tommy himself. It was a street movement, but early days it attracted some crazies. Tommy calls them crazies. Tommy fought back instantly, but nobody in the media reports it. So they were literally they made videos, Tommy and the EDL, burning the swastika flags, saying you're not welcome here. If you're like a fascist, don't come here. And eventually they still took over, so Tommy left anyway. So people would call like Tom Robinson some sort of like far right. I'm like,
they don't have
the guy's a Zionist.
Yeah, he is. What I mean, the one I'm wondering about, because that ARC, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, is that what it is?
I think so. Yeah,
that is a boring name.
It's so Jordan Peterson.
Well, this is what I was going to say. It's like, I ask at the end, who's your favourite heretic? Most of my guests have said Jordan Peterson. He's helped so many people. I think he's helped particularly young men to not become incels, but therefore helping young women, of course, who could have been. And he's helped more than most people in the world, a huge number of people. And yet, when I heard his closing speech, I did start to go, oh, God. And I'm wary of criticizing him because of what you said before. People have their heroes, and most of the listeners of the show, their hero is Jordan Peterson, and he's long been mine as well. But it was really like hard to understand and this is someone who was speaking to normal people. That's what was so good about him originally, make your bed. And it became like he came on stage and there were like horns and trumpets, and they'd just been asking for collections for money and things. It felt very like mega churchy.
Yeah.
And then he sort of looked down for a while, and we're just watching him, and he's got his eyes closed. And then he goes, how to build an ark. And then it was like, Lucifer said to so-and-so. And it was like 40 minutes of that. And I thought, God, is it okay to say, like, this isn't for me, man? You know?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Jordan shouldn't be included in what we were talking about in terms of different categories of, like, Ben Shapiro's and Konstantin.
He's his own thing. He's his own.
Yeah, because those guys are more frontline political culture battles. Jordan is not in politics. He doesn't tend to talk about politics. I mean, sometimes he does, but his thing is more philosophy. He kind of initially, as you said, he normalized philosophy and psychology when he was making all those lecture videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Before he got cancelled. And to be fair, it's kind of interesting because I actually like him and I still follow all the stuff he says. But obviously, when it's politics, sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree. But it is interesting that even back then, they were still... You had to focus on what he's saying. But he managed to normalize, because obviously normal philosophy and even psychology, if someone talks about it, it's too nerdy.
It's boring.
And boring. So he managed to normalize it, but he's still difficult to understand, right?
Yeah, which is a strength. But he managed to get the average person, me, to be able to watch it and understand everything and go, wow.
But this is the thing. So the genius that he had was that we live in this world of impatience and ADHD, and everybody's just scroll up and down. You can't focus for like half an hour. You're like, I just want 10 seconds of content. Next, right? He managed to basically calm those kids down. And they were listening. These young men and boys were watching this stuff for 2 hours. And then you sit there what is he actually saying? But he did it. So genius.
Yeah.
But when it comes to ARC and things like that, that is a more of a bigger movement, and it's a good thing that he's doing it, by the way. But because it's not even just political. It's
religious.
It's more a way of life sort of thing, right? And because his agenda, rightly so, is to fight against the globalist elites sort of types, and the people who create the World Economic Forum type of conferences. So he wants to oppose that. But then if he has to make a speech about it, then it becomes even more nerdy. And then
But it wasn't the World Economic Forum, we got to get those guys, which he has spoken about before, and he's great, but he's like a Dr. Evil kind of, almost in the chair swiveling around with a cat, just time to take out the trash. But this was biblical. This was reading or listening to the Bible.
Yeah. Which is, I didn't know about the fact that they asked for money, considering the tickets for the conference was very expensive.
1,500. Yeah. And look, and this is a problem as well in our sphere. Some people don't want to criticize those kinds because they're friends of friends. You bump into them at parties. I don't want to bump into Jordan. I've never actually said hello to him. He sort of walked within a whisker of me, and then he go, "Yeah, you were the guy doing my accent for 20 minutes on the podcast. I'm not talking to you." So that's the thing that we have to navigate as podcasters.
It is very tricky. The cult of personality are becoming difficult. So right now, I mean, I just objectively basically assessed my own subjective opinion on Jordan or Candace. To be fair, I hope everything I said about Jordan was still complimentary, and I would just say,
why are you so worried? Don't worry.
No, because what I said about Candace should come across as more robust. I don't agree with her brain.
But Jordan can take criticism.
Yeah,
surely.
but the issue, he'll be fine. I could still see him next time, and he'll be fine. But there will be some supporters. Say, oh, now you're a traitor now.
But that's a problem.
The issue.
That is a problem, that we can't criticize anyone without there's thousands of people start commenting at you. How dare you? That's my person that I like.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you can blame some of the influence. This guy, Andrew Gold, he's terrible, and his supporters. No, but I mean, jokes aside, it's fine to have these clashes and debates because there is a difference between somebody getting angry at another influencer getting angry at the other one, and then their supporters just have a fight, which is just a fight because of personality clashes, and something that happened recently in the Oval Office in the White House between President Zelensky and President Trump. You still have people. Ironically, the people who became more tribal, the reaction to that wasn't necessarily the normal people, the keyboard warriors saying, "Oh, I'm Team Zelensky, I'm Team Trump." Obviously, they also existed. It was again the Alastair Campbell types, the grown-ups in the room, the Joe Biden characters. Those people were the ones who did the tribalist, Sure. In this case, we're going to basically say Zelensky is a 100% angel and he did nothing wrong in terms of just what happened in the Oval Office recently. Mm-hmm. And the other side would say basically, because I don't like Zelensky, everything he did was basically wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, surely all three of them were insane.
I mean, the actual clash.
It was brilliant.
It was great to watch. But I mean, Zelensky could have handled it much better because he should have learned from Macron and Starmer. Starmer and Macron were days before, but some was.
But
the
they
day
looked
before.
weak. They looked weak.
No.
Starmer looked weak.
No, because Trump's approach is because he makes them weak, but they have to be on their toes. So Trump did, as usual, the charm offensive on both Macron and Starmer. Like nice. So he makes them, force them to be nice. So Starmer also had to be nice. And actually, it's a win-win for both sides, technically. If Starmer had picked the approach of Zelensky, just go in robust, it would have ended badly.
That's true.
So both sides actually respect each other, because Trump respects alpha males, but he would accept a submissive character who admits he's submissive. So Starmer would admit he's submissive in terms of personality clashes, and Trump gets it, like, okay, I'm not gonna make fun of him too much. I'm just gonna be like, welcome, thank you for the invite to the palace. So he was actually polite to Starmer, whereas he would see a Zelensky character, apart from all the behind the scenes stuff, all the complications about the whole war and everything else, in terms of personality clashes, he sees Zelensky, you're not alpha, but you're coming in there like this.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Tracksuit.
Yeah, I don't like it. So
Yeah.
either submit, or he kept telling me, actually, you're not tough enough. You're not tough. He kept saying it. Or be alpha. So
the language can't have helped. I felt a bit sorry for him, and I totally agree with you. He was wrong.
The miscommunication moments as well. They went so wrongly. I mean, he should have just submitted to translation. Zelensky.
Yeah. I think he should do that.
There were a
from now
couple
on.
of moments where they both said, when they interrupted each other, it was because Zelensky used the wrong word. It's
Yeah.
like, oh no, that's not what.
Or understood the wrong thing
Yes,
as well.
exactly. When he said speak loudly, he wasn't actually, in that moment, he wasn't saying you're shouting at me, because obviously J.D. Vance was saying something. He was talking about when you speak loudly about the war, like publicly and vocally.
Yes.
And then I was like,
no, he's not
no,
shouting.
he's not shouting. Oh no, Zelensky.
I mean,
stop using the wrong words.
Everyone who's got, because some people have no empathy for Zelensky. I understand all the accusations. No one's an angel and no one's completely evil. So
Yep.
it's complicated. But if anyone can imagine going back to those like oral exams, French or Spanish or whatever it was at school, but imagine that's in front of the world at the Oval Office, and you've got Trump and JD Vance really fast talking at you. That is the worst exam anyway. And people say, oh, he's been learning for years now, but to be a Ukrainian learning English, it's not the same as a French person or Spanish person learning English.
Oh.
That's no easy thing.
You should have used an app.
with regards to kicking people out of our tribes and stuff, I always think, look what happened to Sam Harris. He's almost not welcome, Sam Harris, in our sort of anti-woke space. I think he made a mistake in what he said on trigonometry about Trump and no matter what, he wants him out or whatever, Trump derangement syndrome. But he's still got a lot of very useful, interesting things to say, and he's just like gone from our sphere.
Yeah. Whereas ironically, certain others, because this one is about the kind of the Trump comments about Trump, but for example, Richard Dawkins, he got a lot of following at first because he was part of the group that with Christopher Hitchens that were the contrarians at the time in the 2000s, speaking out against religion, especially Islam, right? And they were focusing on the atheist movement, but they were the cool kids because they had the early days YouTube, the memes and the thug life and all that stuff. So they were the new kind of the new media personalities, and even though they were authors. But Richard Dawkins is politically left-wing or liberal.
Yeah.
So it has been occasionally that he's expressed his views, for example, about Brexit a few years ago, and people were like, oh, boo, you're left-wing. But recently, he's just been talking, and over the last couple of years, he actually, because he's seen the problem with the rise of Islam, he as an atheist, well, anti-theist, obviously, his argument is he's now defending at least the cultural values of Christianity. He says,
Yeah.
I would rather Christianity stays. I don't know. My views, and I don't believe in God, but I don't want to remove it. I don't want to destroy the Christian culture because I now appreciate why it's important, because now we can see an actual rival. So now some people on the right actually appreciate him now. They see him like, as opposed to Sam Harris, because he said the wrong thing about one person. He's still left-wing, obviously, Sam Harris. But even though Dawkins is still liberal, same could be said about relatively Bill Maher. People still, he's very still pro-Democrats, but he's so anti-woke that when Ben Shapiro invites him on the show, Ben Shapiro's supporters in the comment section, they say respect to Bill.
Although he recently said there were obviously more than two sexes.
I know, yeah, I don't know what's going on with him.
That really upset me.
The issue with him is that I think he's like the Candace Owens of the other side. He overthinks because he's smart.
Yeah.
And he overthinks. And he smokes weed a lot. That messes up with everything else.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would say whatever people think, if they criticise Sam Harris, Bill Maher, and Dawkins gets a lot of it as well, I would just say, look, the alternative as a kind of centrist or a centre-left is Emily Maitlis. I don't want to keep going back to it. Rory Stewart, Alastair Campbell. And these guys are comparatively cowards, because those other three call out, as much as they might get things wrong in our opinion, they call stuff out and they stand up against the wokeness.
And they would debate it. They would sit here with you and actually talk to you, whereas Emily Maitlis wouldn't.
No.
Or again, Alastair Campbell wouldn't, and all those guys wouldn't. I would rather still have opponents in terms of their ideologies who are like Sam Harris, who are like Dawkins, who are like Bill, because they can still. And also, there have been many times where they've been debating with someone, even Bill on his show, on his YouTube show, where he's talked to someone like on the political right, and eventually at some point Bill says, actually, yeah, you have a point. You will never get that from Emily Maitlis. You're never going to get that.
I hope they do. I think eventually the fashions are going to change and the mainstream is going to see a bit more anti-wokeness, because all the celebrities are coming out and pretending they were never part of that. So they have to, just in terms of fashion.
Also, I'm a little bit sick and tired of the actual focus on woke and wokeness, because the wokeness is the symptom of the bigger problem. There's the battle for the soul of the Western civilization. And there's a clash, because globalization has now made Europeans look the same as the Americans. As I said, there's a massive difference between culturally the Americans and the Europeans. But because of the rise of the internet, the world is much smaller. Movies, TV shows, internet, travel, we see each other more. Everyone thinks just because an average American with a brunette, like brown hair, will look like, I don't know, someone from France, and especially someone from England, because they also speak the same language, they're the same creatures. I can assure you, if the Americans didn't speak English and look differently, we'll see them as like Martians, like a whole different species. The problem with that is that globalization and wokeness, all this stuff, they are different fights for different cultures, but we're all fighting it the same way, which is really weird. So the battle mostly for liberty is from the American argument, the American culture, liberty. Anti-wokeness in America is anti-big government and anti the globalist establishment sort of thing. Whereas in Britain, for example, we have feminists, left-wing feminists like J.K. Rowling. They're fighting against wokeness, not for the same reasons. They're fighting it for they're still fighting for the right reasons, because in terms of they're saying women should be women, but they're not concerned about the rise of big government. They're just saying, as long as you keep that man away from my toilet, I'm fine as J.K. Rowling. Whereas the Americans, the stereotype, the clash between the woke culture is that they see a fear of tyranny rising.
Yeah.
They say, you're going to tell me what to do with toilets now. What next? Tax on tea again? So all that's
interesting. Yeah, and soon the authorities start revealing information like they've done about you. Do you know the fellow who has done this? Do you know anything about him? Is he an Islamist?
No, well, we don't know. Because apparently the investigation is still ongoing. There's a bureaucracy in this country.
Yeah, he was bailed though.
Yeah, we do know that, as far as they say, he was a contractor, so his contract was terminated, and but he had access, at least physically in the office, in the studio, the police station, to the monitor, the computer, to take a picture of it. So again, we don't know how much access. Did he actually have the login detail? Was it his own monitor screen? Or was he just walking to go to the toilet and one monitor was on? And that one is also bad. That means a police officer just left that screen on. Yeah. That's neglect. There's so many issues with this.
Horrible that why are they looking into you in the first place? You're not a violent person.
No, I mean, the thing is, I still don't know the motive. Like the real motive. Like, you know.
Yeah. Have you ever punched someone?
Huh?
Have you ever punched someone?
No, but I did.
What?
I did accidentally when I was a kid in Lewisham, southeast London. We were playing football against some people. It was a very diverse area. I might have done a proper Boris style rugby tackle against someone, almost kicked him, and then everyone looked at me saying, "Do you know what you did?" I was like, "What? You just beat up the drug dealer in the area." So that was there was one kick. and I ran away and hid for a while.
My God. And that taught you a lesson. But that's what I mean. I mean, they should be looking at violent people.
Exactly.
It's bonkers to me that they're even doing reports about you. It makes me wonder who else they're doing reports about and who else might be shared now by a disgruntled employee.
There has to be a proper look into the system itself. We got big problems. People think sometimes the decision, when we say two-tier system, sometimes it's political decisions, and sometimes it's just the paperwork in the legislations. We had one person who sent threatening emails to Jess Phillips. He got jailed for like a year or so. Fair, inciting violence. But then an MP punched someone 5 times. He didn't go to jail. He had to pay a fine for £200, which is £40 per punch. That's kind of good value. I mean, so if the MP had sent an email to the constituents threatening him, he would have been in jail more than when he punched them. Isn't it weird?
This is this move, and it's filtered down from the top as it starts in the liberal institutions to the working class game of football. I'm a big football fan. I'm watching that all the time, and I noticed that there's a Uruguayan player called Bentancur, who joked it wasn't even in England at the time. The Premier League wasn't even going on. It was the summer. He joked that his teammate, who's Korean, looked like his cousin. Like the Koreans looked the same as the joke. Silly joke. Yeah. Should have maybe got a tap on, maybe even get a fine or some such thing. I don't even know. It's a silly joke, but notably a joke that in Korea would be fine. No, that's really funny in Korea, as it is in Uruguay, but not in our special country. Yeah. He got banned. I mean, if 1 or 2 games would have been excessive, he got banned for 8 games, which is like unheard of in football. People who go in and break people's legs get banned for 3 games. So it's gone down to that level, I think, where it's filtered through the whole of society, where it is normal now for physical violence to be less punitive word or punishable than words that hurt someone's feelings.
Well, it's funny because I think psychologically the people who push for words of violence sort of thing, the liberal, kind of left-wing liberal middle classes, I think psychologically, back of their brain, their fear is the word could lead to Hitler. So I'm like, okay, I get your argument, fine, sure. Let's go with that. But what about the right now imminent physical threats? Like the imminent, someone is actually doing something to someone. Like as you said, like an MP punching, or like you break someone's leg, you get three matches banned. It's mostly because their focus is also on a more globalized way. So the whatever you want to call it, the woke side, or I call it the anti-West side, the culture comes from Marxism, and Marxism was like Islam. It was global. It was a one world government. It was internationalization. As opposed to, for example, National Socialists in Germany, which was like just internal, or fascists with Mussolini, which is internal. Just we're going to do authoritarianism in our country instead of just exporting it. The problem with that is that now you have people, if you say something here, if you say something in France, you get someone in Cornwall being offended on behalf of someone in Africa, even if that person is not offended. Yeah. That's where we've reached now.
It's insane. It made me look up Korean speech laws and things, and they're one of the rare countries that don't even have a discrimination law because the people don't want it. Yeah. So they find this stuff out, they don't care. But anyway, I've got one more question for you, but first, where can people find your work?
Yes, so only for... Oh, no, that's a different website. So,
that's next, Lily Phillips.
Actually, we get a lot of membership. So we obviously... YouTube is the main platform, 2c.tv. No, that's 2c TV. The website is 2c.tv. Obviously, you can join as a member. We're doing a lot of... we're actually scaling up now. We're doing a lot of documentaries. A lot of good work. Recently, we just had the Groomed documentary presented and produced by Sammy Woodhouse. We got a lot in the pipeline. We're actually bringing out an app to make it easier for people to actually... We're basically properly competing with the actual legacy media. And the idea is to also help other new media outlets, whether they're podcasters or whatever, to also, as a movement, to work together. So
I love that. I love that. It's the only way to rise up and change things. Who's a heretic you admire?
Me. Actually, I mean, especially with everything that's going on and where he is, I'll say Tommy Robinson, because of he's an imperfect character, and he would admit, but it's unfair not just what's happening to him in prison, because his treatments, but actually the way he gets cancelled and attacked is unfair. You could criticize him on many things, but what they're attacking him on is false. He's a good guy who's imperfect, a good friend who's definitely not far right. He had issues with temper back in the day. He used to drink. He doesn't anymore. He's boring. But he opened the gates. He was a bulldozer who brought down the gate to talk about grooming gangs and similar issues. And nobody said thank you.
I think that's a great heretic. I think he did have a drink when I was with him, but maybe not as much as he used to. Anyway, I don't think he's drawn a line like that, but it wasn't too much. I don't want to sort of expose. I'm sure that's the least of his problems, though. The least of his worries. What, you said I drink? I haven't been drinking at all. Brilliant. Heretic, and people, please go follow Tousi TV. We'll have a couple of the links down below. He's one of the best, probably the best there is, and he's a good friend of the show. So please do go and follow him and all of that stuff. Hit the like. Keep watching this channel.